Welcome to part 2 of our conversation about demand avoidance. In this half of the podcast, we'll be talking advice for parents, family dynamics, and encouraging understanding in others. I'm joined once again by Options Autism's Chief Clinical Officer, Freya Spicer-White, and Deputy Head of Clinical Operations, Paula Walker. Let's dive straight in. Advice for parents whose child is really struggling. Stop, ready, go days. Collaboration with the young person exhibiting demand avoidance traits and choosing the right time to talk is important. Let's hear about what that might involve. So if you've got a child that is really, really struggling and they are essentially probably in burnout, they cannot bring themselves to sometimes probably even get out of bed, what advice could you give parents in that situation? How can they support their young person?
Yeah, first of all, I'd say to a parent, be kind to yourself. It's a tough job, and be kind to your young person. And then think about how you can work with that young person. So as Paula was mentioning earlier, that collaboration piece. So that would be really, really useful. And tend to sort of almost kind of think about, we've also talked a lot today about pick your battles. So you might decide to kind of really think about what kind of day are you or is your young person having? Is it a complete stop day? Is it a no day? So are they at burnout? Actually, that is not a good day for you to say, actually, can you do all of these things that are on the list that I need you to do? Because you know that young person is kind of at their end of their tether. They might be sort of, a medium day, for example, where actually you could ask for some small demands that they're usually, that they can do, that they feel confident in. That those are the sorts of things that they can, do easily. And then you might have go days where, that young person is in a really great mood, they're feeling really confident, and that might be the day where you can give them some more of those demands and challenges. And I think it's just as a parent, again, getting to know your young person really, really well, working with them to think about those strategies and thinking about those communication styles as well.
Now, Paula, what happens when we talked a little bit about this dysregulation that can occur? So if you've got a 5 or a 6-year-old who is refusing to get in the car, put their seatbelt on, it's not pleasant, but it's manageable. When they start to get bigger, and sometimes these outbursts can be violent and they can be angry, what's that like for a parent? How do you cope with that?
Absolutely, that's super challenging. What we would do in our house, our young person isn't violent, but will brick wall us, as we like to call it. But we do sort of a bit of a rewind of the situation. We'll say, come on, let's go back in the house. Let's take some time out, have a drink, have a packet of crisps. We'll talk about it in 15 minutes, half an hour. And then we'll go back and say, is this something we can fix, or is this a no day? Yeah. Is this just not going to happen? Sometimes he will come back and say, I can do it in half an hour. And we'll say, okay, leave you to it. We'll be back in half an hour. Obviously, there's some things in life that are very time sensitive. So appointments and things like that, we have lots and lots of prior warning. We find transitions are quite a challenge for our young person. So making sure we're not just saying, this is the place we're going. We'll also be this is how long we'll be in the car. This is the journey we're taking. This is where we're parking. This is the walk from the car park to the place that we're going to. Really breaking it down. So there's nothing in there that he can kind of be overly worried about, because we've spoken about it in depth beforehand. So for those things that we know we've got to be there at a certain time, we'll sometimes say it's a little bit earlier.
I was going to say, do you give about the time?
We can often say we need to be there at 10 when really it's 11. But also if we're 5, 10, 15 minutes late, most places are really accommodating if you just give them a call and say we're running late. That they are okay. And as a parent, holding on to your anxieties around that. So I really like to be on time. I realised that was quite a challenge for me, being really late. So I had to work on that for me and go, is this a hill I want to die on today? Or kind of really making sure you're planning every step of it, so you're taking away some of that and doing a rewind. Let's go back in the house. Let's go back to your safe space and give you some of your safe things, and we can go from there rather than digging your heels in at the car door.
Yeah, my way or the highway doesn't work, does it?
No, not
We
ever.
use a lot of timers in my house. This is the 10-minute warning, 5-minute warnings, because the time blindness as well is a big factor in this. Building an understanding support network. An open and honest approach to the help you need can work wonders. It can lead to gaining support you might not even expect. I'm thinking now as well about these mornings where this your young person or a young person might be absolutely adamant that they're not going to school, or they're not going to the childminders, or they're not going on the family activity. What if you've got to be at work? What on earth do you do then?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really complex issue. It's really thinking about the community around you, but also discussing it with your employer, explaining where you're at the moment. There's lots of flexible working policies, there's lots of carers policies. Being open and honest with your employer is really, really important, because you'll find some support there perhaps you didn't expect.
Yeah.
I do know that out there, I'm in a really lucky position in that I can sometimes work at home, and that will work for us, and I can be a bit more flexible. But I can imagine if you're a single parent who has to go out to work, how challenging this can be. And I certainly see from the forums I'm on people who are forced to give up work, register for carers allowance and those kind of things to be able to support themselves because their child can't access school. So it's really kind of exploring what will work for you, utilising people around you, having a plan with school about what you're going to do if it doesn't work is really important. But yeah, kind of thinking about the people around you who can support you, because there isn't a magic fix, unfortunately.
No, and that's the sort of secondary impact, isn't it? It's going to impact on families' livelihoods as well as their general quality of life. And it's that kind of real, it shows the importance of dispelling the stigma around this condition, because a little bit more understanding and people would be more willing to help. But I think people from the outside often might just perceive these children as being naughty. I mean, I was told that my child, of course he'd eat fruit if I just chopped it up, and I was like, I've tried that.
I think as well, particularly in mainstream schools at the moment, their attendance policies have become much more rigorous, and there's much more fining of parents that's happening currently, and that's a real stressor for parents. And I can see from some of the information I'm seeing out there that schools aren't effectively supporting the parents as they need to. So kind of really communicating with your school the reason behind your young person not being in school, where that's coming from, what that looks like, is really, really important right now.
Demand avoidance and the family dynamic. The family dynamic can easily be upset, and it's not unusual for siblings to feel a degree of conflict when it comes to demand avoidance. Here's why that is. I'm now also thinking about families where you've got more than one child. So perhaps in a family you've got one child that's neurodivergent and has got a demand avoidance profile, and then you might have siblings that do not. That's going to be quite challenging as a parent, because if you, for example, take the kids to the beach and you've got one child that absolutely refuses to step foot on the stand, I've literally been in this position, and the other children are quite upset because they want to do this nice family activity, and that can cause, I imagine, some degree of animosity or even resentment within the family dynamic itself. I'm wondering whether you've got any tips or strategies for families out there that are living this very real reality and how they can manage it.
Yeah, I think for families, again, as you were mentioning, Rosie, that could be really tricky for siblings, because they could feel really angry. You know, why is my brother always ruining things? Or why is my sister getting away with so much that I can't get away with? So again, I think it comes back to, talking as a family and helping those siblings understand that young person's differences, and helping those, their siblings understand that sometimes actually that young person might feel overwhelmed or anxious. So the siblings then are able to kind of have a better understanding, and actually understand that some of that is actually really, really quite usual for siblings to have that kind of degree of conflict. But I think it's about helping them to understand, being prepared, for maybe having, a secondary plan. So maybe if there is a young person within the family who doesn't want to do something, if there's two parents, or you've brought a friend with you, or there's something else, so you've got a plan B. So the plan A was that we're all going to go to the beach, but maybe plan B is if one of the young people can't, can't get out of the car, or is feeling, doesn't want to go in the beach, that there is a plan B, how else that could sort of, how else you could manage that day so the other young people don't miss out. So again, it is a complex juggling act. And I think it's always kind of almost, you have to not just be one step ahead, but maybe 2 or 3 steps ahead.
Yeah, because it also will teach the siblings a huge amount of empathy, because I know that my 2 neurotypical children have much more understanding of neurodiversity. They are really willing to engage and listen now. That hasn't always been the case. And I have had those moments, I hate them. Why do they have to ruin everything? And I've used strategies like you've described, where sometimes you feel ever so mean doing it, but where one child won't go and do something and you feel really horrible. But of course, if the child doesn't want to go, and they're going to be desperately unhappy and therefore make everybody else unhappy as well, sometimes that is a choice that has to be made.
Yeah, and it's also thinking about actually with that young person, if it is maybe, that they're really going to struggle with a certain activity, that actually it's okay for them not to be included in that activity. So maybe again, as a family, you decide to go as a family day out to the beach, but you maybe arrange for that other young person to have another activity at a different time. So again, it's about thinking, it's about fitting all those pieces together, and trying to think about, again, keeping calm as well, even though that might be many times so difficult and a real challenge for the siblings, for the parents, and for the young person themselves. It's around kind of thinking about strategies that you all can use to stay calm, whether that's doing some deep breathing, doing some distraction with some music that you all like, having those things that mean that you can just take it that little step back.
Yeah, because I'm thinking there about the anger, and we're human, right? We're human as parents. And sometimes, even though we know that the child can't help their behaviours, we feel quite hurt and upset and sometimes angry. And when those times when you do lose your temper and flare up and shout, how do you come back from that with a child that's got a demand avoidance profile? What's the best way to sort of build bridges? Is it to sort of say, we're just going to rewind and, go back to where we were, sort of not dwell on it, I'm guessing?
In our house, we're a big fan of apologising.
Yeah.
If we feel like we've overstepped the mark, we will immediately apologise and say, I'm really sorry you had to see that I was angry today. Being really honest about those things is really important. And we will say, let's rewind. Let's start again. I'm going to go and have a breather because I shouldn't have lost my temper then. And then we'll come back together and have a chat about it when we're all ready. Just being really open and honest with your young people is a really good thing. And it shows that it's not about them as a person, it's about that moment, that behaviour you saw in that moment, and not who you think they are.
And also showing that we're fallible, that we do lose our temper, and then we acknowledge it, apologise, and start again. And that's probably a really good lesson for them to see demonstrated.
Yeah, something we say in our house is it's our first times being grown-ups.
Yeah.
It's our first time doing this too, so we're really sorry if we get it wrong, and that works quite nicely.
That is really nice. So thinking about the sibling dynamic, and in a household where you might have some neurotypical and neurodivergent children, what can parents do you think, to sort of mitigate the feeling of perhaps being a little bit unseen for the child that's living alongside somebody with avoidance?
A friend of mine does a lovely thing called a yes day with her neurotypical child. So where they've had several instances of perhaps not being able to go and do that thing, or having to cancel arrangements because their youngest couldn't access it, they will allow the sibling of that child to nominate a yes day, and during that day his mum takes him out for the day. They do exactly what he would like to do within reason. She says yes to lots of different things, and he can ask for that. So if he starts to feel like he's losing out, he can go to his mum and say, can we book one in the next week or 2 weeks? And she'll put it on the calendar, and he feels like, yeah, I've had to miss out on those things, but I'm going to get to do some things I'm really excited about. So that really works well for them as a family.
Parents, be kind to yourself too. What does it mean when the person you love most constantly says no? For parents, it can take an emotional toll. So looking after your own well-being is vital. So we talked a bit about how you can support the young person and how you can support their siblings. But I'm wondering now about the parents, because having the person who loves you the most in the world repeatedly say no to you is really quite draining and quite hurtful. And all the things that you're supposed to do to be a good parent, the feeding them the right food, the exercise, the family trips out, so many of those things you just can't do. And that's going to take its toll emotionally. I'm just wondering if either of you had any sort of advice or guidance on that.
Yeah, that's a really important question, Rosie, thinking about parents. Because actually, if they don't look after their own well-being, they're going to burn out. And then that's going to have a bigger impact on their young person as well. So one of the things I always say to parents is be kind to yourself. So almost that self-talk as well that kind of goes on in our heads. So sometimes I always say to people, think about it's advice that you are giving to a friend rather than to yourself, because you might be saying, oh gosh, I'm just not a good enough parent because I'm not doing this or I'm not doing that, or I'm beating myself up for the things that I'm not doing. Actually recognize all the things that you are doing and praise yourself for those positives, and kind of have that approach that that kind advice that you would give to a friend. Just as Paula was mentioning about yes days, I think it's also really important for a parent or carer to have like time out for themselves as well. So think about something that you might really enjoy. It might be spending time with a friend. It might be going to a spa. It might be, going for a walk in nature. So think about scheduling that time regularly for yourself. Don't see it as selfish. See it as part of your self-care routine that enables you to be the best parent or carer that you can be for your young person.
So when it comes to the idea of self-care, we often think that it has to be something quite big, spa day, night away in a hotel. These, lovely, right? But if you've got a child that does display these demand avoidance profile, you might struggle to get somebody to look after them. Now, I've been in that position myself, and you feel very, very trapped, because if you can't leave them with somebody else, what do you do? And I'm thinking, are there other sort of more incremental changes that you can make to protect your own mental health and emotional well-being?
Yeah, absolutely. Some things like standing outside in the sunshine with a cup of tea for 10 minutes, picking up the phone and speaking to someone that you love and that loves you, having connections that are virtual with people that are in the same boat as you, I think are really important. There's lots of online forums out there you can join, and local support groups that you may be able to access on a virtual basis on Facebook, where you can talk to people who are seeing the same struggles as you are. Also thinking about, is this something that's really important? Is this the bridge, the hill that I want to die on? For me, food is really important in my family, and having a child who really doesn't want to eat any of your food feels challenging. But I recognise that was a me problem, not a him problem. So actually thinking plain pasta is okay and it's meeting his basic needs is okay, and something I have to really prompt myself and remind myself, this does not make me a bad parent. That I found some of those changes were really important. It doesn't matter that his bedroom is a bit tidy. It doesn't matter that he's eaten plain pasta for 2 days in a row because he's eaten
for every meal.
Kind of really being kind and thinking about those things. Doing some yoga online. There's some really excellent YouTube videos around yoga, exercise, those kind of things, and carving some time out that is just for you, even if it means you're still in your house, but kind of protecting that time.
And it can be something like, I often say I'm going to put the laundry away, and I can be found surrounded by laundry, having a little lay down on the bed, and you just grab that sort of 10-15 minutes of peace, and it does recharge that battery a little bit.
Yeah, I love an audio book with my noise cancelling headphones on. It just gives me a little bit of space from everybody else in my house. It gives me half an hour to myself, even though I'm still in my house doing something that I love. And it makes me feel a lot better and a lot more prepared to kind of tackle something else afterwards.
You mentioned the sort of online communities. Now, the internet has many pitfalls, but this idea that you can access people who are going through a similar experience to you at any time, day or night, I think that is an incredibly valuable resource. And it's somewhere that you can ask the questions that we're trying to do on this podcast. Ask the questions but ask some of your peers, find out what's working for them, what's working for you, and possibly even, maybe even meet up in real life, because there's real magic in that, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely. They can be a real good support for people. So really kind of not shying away from those and thinking, oh, it's an online group.
Yeah.
Certainly some of the groups that we're involved in, there's definitely local meetups. There's connections. There's people I now speak to kind of offline, as it were, that I've built connections with, just that help you kind of keep grounded and make sure that you're continuing to go on the right path and managing those stress levels.
And there's you talked about managing those expectations. And from the very moment that you become pregnant or you have a child, you automatically feel like you're failing, right? Everything you thought you would do, you don't. We're brilliant parents until we have them. And so you letting go of that expectation of perfection. I have a very selective eater at home as well, and I supplement with vitamins and probiotics because I too have had to just accept the fact that his diet is going to be very limited for at least a short term. At some point I hope he'll eat better, but they're alive, they're fed, they're happy and they're loved, and that's more important than so many of the sticks we use to beat ourselves with, I think.
Yeah, and making sure the people around you are also buying into that.
Yes.
Sometimes parents, grandparents will have something to say. Certainly we've had, he needs to be in school. We were very aware of that at the time. But having those conversations with them about actually that's not helpful for us right now, but what would be helpful would be half an hour babysitting on a Sunday morning so we can go and have a cup of tea and go for a walk. That would be more useful right now than you telling us we need to get him into school. So having those conversations and not being afraid to be really direct with the people around you and say, we're finding this really stressful and you're not helping. I think you need to be kind to yourself and also sort of stand up in that and say, these are the ways you can help us better.
Encouraging understanding in others. Now, let's focus on the fact that the way neurodivergent people process the world is different. Encouraging people to move away from unhelpful language can increase understanding and support. And actually that is quite an interesting topic, isn't it? It's explaining, all aspects of SEN and neurodiversity to the older generation. I don't want to stereotype. And I'm wondering if there's any language or explanations that you would recommend that we can use when perhaps talking to grandparents or carers outside of the immediate family that might have input into your child.
Yeah, I tend to say things around or helping people take a step back from sort of blame and fault. Mm-hmm. So rather than thinking about, somebody's doing something on purpose, actually helping them recognise that maybe their brain is functioning in a different way. So their thoughts, their sensory experiences, the way they process the world is different to the way we do. So actually that needs a different response. Mm-hmm. So helping people to kind of move away from they're doing something on purpose because they're, they want to do it or they're challenging, actually recognising that it's actually sometimes, even though it's maybe that young person who is causing sometimes some of those tricky bits, it also might be that young person who is extremely distressed at the heart of that as well. So helping people really understand why something's happening, and as Paula was saying, what they can do in order to best help. What is the best support that person can do for that family, for that young person?
Well, I think it's kind of critical as well to underline the fact that the young person is not doing this for fun. They're not doing this because they want to disrupt their home life, their school life. They're not doing this because they are, and to use the word, naughty. They're doing this because they are anxious or dysregulated or they cannot cope in the world. So I think to maintain an element of empathy both towards the child themselves and to the parents who are trying so desperately to support them.
And I think sometimes as a parent, thinking about the language that you use around what's going on in your house. So we stopped using, he's refusing to, he won't, and turned it into he's too anxious to, and he can't right now. And it made a big difference to how school and grandparents were viewing sort of what was going on in our house. So thinking perhaps about some of the language you're using. And actually it felt like a change for us in how we felt about the situation as well when we stopped saying he's refusing to and started saying he's too anxious to. We started to address it a different way. So thinking about that language is really important.
Yeah, because even the term school refuser is quite sort of damning, isn't it? It implies that they've got a choice in the matter. For any parents out there listening, please know that you're not alone in this. There are resources available at optionsautism.co.uk, and you can give us a follow on the socials for more information. Thank you for listening. I'll be back with you next time.